I'm back, baby! Now, unfortunately, YouTube does not pay my bills, and my full-time job can get in the way of my filming schedule. But I'm back, and I've got some cool stuff coming up here real soon. Now, before I forget, like I have in every single one of my YouTube videos that I've put up so far, go follow me on Instagram. There will be a link in the description, and if you do go follow me, there's not a lot of stuff on there because, well, nobody follows me. So if you guys can head on over, give me a follow, and I'll start posting some more regular content there to kind of give you guys updates in between videos and maybe some behind the scenes so that way you guys can keep up to date with me when I'm not posting. Now, speaking of paying the bills, you've paid yours and now you got that sweet money burning a little hole in your pocket and you got the itch to buy a printer. And maybe it's a new printer or maybe it's your first printer. And the question is, do you go out and buy this guy, the Bambu Lab A1? As you may or may not know, this printer was actually recalled. It has a problem with this cable right here that connects the heat bed to the body where it, lights itself on fire if it fails. I haven't had this problem with my printer, and just because I haven't had it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but Bambu Lab seems pretty intent on fixing this issue. And so they sent out an email and you're able to just return the printer or you're able to get a new heat bed when they come out with it. I personally just chose to get a new heat bed when they fix it, and I imagine once they fix it, the printer will go back up for sale. And what I want this video to be is a long-term use video so that people who are interested in it when it goes back up on sale can have a frame of reference for how this printer performs. A bunch of other YouTubers have done unboxings and first impressions with this printer, but I bought this myself and I got it right when it came out. So I've been using it for a couple months and I want to give my impressions of how this printer performs so that way if anyone is curious about picking this printer up once they re-release it, they can know what to expect. I'm going to primarily compare this printer to the Elegoo Neptune 4 Pro, mostly because, well, I just have one. And second, because they are similar in format and they're both bed slingers, they're a similar size, and they're in a relatively similar price range. The Bambu Lab A1 without the AMS is about $400 before taxes and shipping, and the Neptune 4 Pro is right now on sale for about $280. It's normally like $330, and you can even get it cheaper than $280 sometimes. With the Neptune being significantly cheaper, I think it'll be interesting to compare the two. What I want to show you guys first is some prints from both of these machines that I did with completely stock settings, because I figured the average person would buy the Bambu Lab A1, set it up, open the slicer with the default profile, and just hit go. So with all of these prints on the A1, I left the flow calibration on for all of these prints. And for the Neptune, it's not as straightforward because it doesn't have a suite like the Bambu Lab printers do, like Bambu Studio. It has a version of Cura that is kind of specific to the printer, but let's be honest, I'm not using Cura, sorry about that. So what I did was I used Orca Slicer and I just copied over all of the settings from the A1, except the accelerations, because the stock accelerations on this thing are like 10K, which is way too much for the Neptune. So I copied everything over, except those accelerations, I set them to a reasonable value, and I printed with pretty much the exact same settings on the Neptune as I did on the A1. Here I have a few models that I think test a variety of different things and show some strong and weak points of both printers. I'll put links in the description for each of the models that I can, although you might not see links for some because I can't share them. The first model is the Cali Dragon by Magaibeer, and this thing is really nice because it tests several different things without wasting too much filament and prints pretty quickly. The first thing is bridging and overhangs, which you can see here under the chin, and on the back of these horns, there's just some very steep overhangs. It tests stringing, which you can see between the horns. It has small features like these scales on the back, and you can see ghosting or ringing in the sides where it transitions into the scales. First up, we have the print on the A1 with the stock settings. I think this actually did a really good job. The layer stacking is pretty good, and it overall looks very smooth, and which is what I like to see. There's minimal stringing, and the overhangs on the chin and on the back of the horns actually came out surprisingly well. Next up, we have the one from the Neptune 4 Pro in the A1 stock settings, and I think this also did a really good job, surprisingly using the settings from the A1. I think it did just as good, if not better, but comparable with the bridging on the chin and the horns. The next model is a piece of scenery from Printable Scenery, which is a stone wall that features a lot of overhangs and bridging. And this is a really tough print. And you can see that on the bottom here, on this side, the A1 does an okay job, but on this other side is where you start to see things fall apart. And on the left there, It struggles a lot with those overhangs and bridges. Then we have the Neptune, which does a very similar job, but I do think this ended up being a little bit better, especially with those underside bridges and overhangs. If you look on this side, I think this side definitely looks a little better, especially in the top right. And if you look on this side, this is still just very tough, but I will talk about why the Neptune might be a little better a little later. I use this fidget toy model primarily to test tolerances. They're not very tight on this model, but right off the build plate, every piece moved on the A1. And then you can see from the profile here that the sides are very smooth. On the Neptune, every piece moved right off the build plate as well, and we get some very smooth walls on the sides as well. The last model is a dice box that I designed and I sell. The A1 has a bit of a defect here in the middle, and we'll talk about that later. I printed this because I'm used to printing it. I printed a lot, and I know what it should look like. And overall, the A1 did a pretty good job. The walls are smooth, and the layer stacking looks good. The Neptune has that same defect in the middle, although it is a little bit better, and again, we'll talk about that. But overall from the Neptune, it looks pretty similar, and the layer stacking looks good, and it's smooth all throughout. So now that you've looked at some prints with the stock A1 profile, what I want to do is switch to the profile that I have tuned for each printer, which also means for the Neptune switching over to Super Slicer, because that's what I would normally use for that printer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and show you guys these prints up close, and I'm going to talk about kind of what I changed and why I think it impacted these prints. So first, let's take a look at these prints from the A1. So this one on the left is going to be what you saw earlier. It was the first print with the stock profile, and the one on the right is going to be with the profile that I personally tuned. And I think right off the bat, right here, you can see that it's much more improved here on the right. And that's due to slowing the print down such that the overhangs have adequate time to cool. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of stock printer profiles, is they're just too dang fast. But I think what it highlights is that the cooling on the A1 is not adequate for the speeds that they put on those stock profiles. Flipping this over, I think you can see that it is a little bit improved here on the right side, especially right here. You can see that the overhangs are just a little bit smoother than they are right here. And overall, this print does look a little bit better, and that's thanks to slowing things down and allowing the plastic to cool. Looking at these prints from the Neptune, again, the stock one is on the left and my tuned profile is on the right. We get a similar story where you can see right here and here, the overhangs are much less droopy, and overall, they are just smoother on this right print. We get a similar story where things are just smoother over here and less droopy than they were on the stock print. And then I want to give you guys a nice little shot of the tuned A1 print versus the tuned Neptune print. And on this side, you can see that strangely, the A1 actually did a little bit of a better job on this left side versus the Neptune. But overall, this Neptune print is just a bit smoother. And you can see that especially on the top right. There's a bit of droopy overhangs on the A1 print, and it's overall just pretty smooth on the Neptune. Flipping it over, I think the Neptune did a phenomenal job on this side, especially on the top right and kind of, right here. It is just super smooth on the Neptune print, and while it does look good on the A1, the Neptune just did a better job. And I think that's primarily because of this giant rocket ship of a fan that the Neptune has strapped to the back of it, versus this tiny little single blower fan that the A1 uses for its part cooling. And speaking of cooling, I have the print from the A1 on the top and the print from the Neptune of my tuned profile on the bottom. And you can see that the A1 has that defect I talked about in the middle, and the Neptune just really doesn't at all. Part of this is cooling, actually. This is a layer timing thing where more cooling really helps, and I couldn't really get rid of it on the A1. And this is also due to the fact that I get to use Super Slicer on the Neptune 4 Pro and access some settings that I just cannot access on the A1 or any Bambu Lab printer because I can't use Super Slicer to slice for it. At this point, you might be wondering why I'm basically suggesting that the Neptune kind of dunks all over the A1. Isn't this video supposed to be about the A1? The reason I showed you guys that is because I think expectations of print quality out of a printer are one of the most important things when you're shopping for one. I wanted to show you guys some real examples of a cheaper printer that prints same or better than the A1. Could the A1 be tuned a little bit more? Yeah, sure. But the marketing around this printer suggests this is just a fully automatic, set it up, hit a button and go kind of printer, And if you want the most out of it, it can't be that way. But that's where something like the Neptune steps in, because it's not marketed like it's supposed to just magically print out of the box. And while I showed that the Neptune can potentially print better than the A1, I think another important consideration is the features the A1 has, and Bambu Lab printers in general, that almost no other printer on the market has. The day I got this thing, I just pulled up MakerWorld on my phone, tossed it to my wife, and said, hey, pick something to print. And she's never touched a printer in her life, and she ended up picking this Stumpy the T-Lite model and hit a couple buttons, and then boom, the printer starts printing from the other room. This is something that I don't know that you can do on like any other printer or most other printers. And while the print came out really well on the A1, I mean, you can just print the same thing on the Neptune and it comes out just as good, if not better. But you can't just do it on your phone like you could the A1. And really, that's what the higher price tag is getting you. Convenience and hobbyist features that almost no other printer on the market has. And I think that this highlights an important difference between the two printers. That while the A1 is marketed as easy, and don't get me wrong, it is easy, that means the printer becomes harder to deal with because it's very proprietary. It's integrated so well with Bambu Studio and MakerWorld, and it's so automatic that when things go wrong with it, you kind of become beholden to Bambu Lab to fix issues with it. When you have a printer like an Elegoo or a Creality or a Prusa, or even something more complicated like a Voron, you know that most of the things that go wrong with it are probably your fault. You probably set up something wrong, you sliced it wrong, you built it wrong. But with the Bambu Lab, when something goes wrong, you kind of just have to open a ticket and wait and see if they can help you fix it, especially if the intended audience, the hobbyist who wants to just have their printer set up and go, buys the printer. They might not have as much experience with a printer as someone who would have built a Voron or would buy a Prusa or something like that. And if something actually breaks on your printer and it's an Elegoo or whatever else, usually you can upgrade it with non-OEM parts that are better than the ones that came with the printer, or you can print a replacement or buy some OEM replacement parts. But with a Bambu Lab, I mean, I'm not saying that parts aren't available, because they are, but certain parts aren't, and you have to deal with your warranty and with Bambu Lab support. And overall, you can't just upgrade these machines or tweak them or tune them the same way that you could something else. Last, let me mention some things I really don't like about this machine. The way they set up the poop chute, and sidebar here, some of you guys were real mad about me calling it poop in my last video. Well, that's what it is, it's poop, and I'm gonna talk about it again. So the way they set up the poop chute here on the side of this printer is crazy. I printed this part that like stops the poop from shooting across the room, because let me tell you what, this shit goes across the room out of the box. I don't know why they did it this way. They should just make this an OEM part that comes on the printer. It's beyond me. The light here on the side, completely worthless. Don't even know why they put it there. The camera, I mean, it's nice that you have a camera, but it only does like low FPS. It's like 2 FPS. And you basically get a slideshow. And while that could be good for time lapses, just checking on the print and seeing what it's doing while you're printing, it's not super useful. Unlike the one on the X1, which is very useful. You can check in, you can get high quality videos of your printer, but with this one, you kind of can't. And one really niche thing that probably no one else will experience, or maybe you will, you cannot put embedded magnets in your print. And I have a clip and I'll show you that basically when the printer head goes over a magnet that you're gonna embed in your print, when it gets below the blower fan that they have on the printer, it will stop the fan from spinning. And you can see here in this clip that the fan is at 100%, and then when I move the tool head over the magnet, the fan will stop, and then when I move the tool head back over, the fan starts again. So unfortunately, anything that you wanted to print with embedded magnets, you just can't print on this printer. So after all that yapping, the upshot is that I do think that this is very much a hobbyist machine. It is a good printer and it has some really good features, including being able to have an AMS, which for Bambu Lab printers, the AMSs are really, really nice and they're integrated really well. If you don't have a printer and you want to get started into printing, I think this is a good choice. I really do. But I would weigh it against other options like the Neptune, which is cheaper, or anything else that's in the price range, because the features that you get with an A1 might not be right for you, and the features that you could get with something else for cheaper or even more expensive could be more appropriate for you. I have 6 printers right now, and the X1 and the Neptune are some of the most used printers that I have, but I still rely on the A1 to do quick prototypes because after all the negative things I've said about it, and positive, most importantly, it just works. When I send a print to it, I know that it's gonna print, and I know it's gonna come out at least semi-good. I don't expect it to come out perfect, but that's not what I bought this printer for, and that's not what I rely on this printer for. And what I rely on this printer for the most is quick and easy nozzle swaps between 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, and even 0.8 to do really small models or even quick prototypes. And that's actually what I use this printer for the most, is using those larger nozzles to get a print where I don't really care what it looks like, but I care that it comes out quickly. So let me know in the comments if you guys agree, if you already have an A1, how you feel about it, if you were thinking about buying one before they recalled it, if you're still going to, just let me know. Remember to follow me on Instagram, so that way I can get better, more frequent updates to you guys. And remember to subscribe here, because regardless of what printer you choose, your prints will always come out buttery smooth. I'll see you guys in the next one.